Welcome to the Haunted Lore podcast, where we explore the darkest corners of history and the supernatural phenomena that linger in places forgotten by time but remembered by spirits. Today, we're traveling to the heart of Colombia's capital city, Bogotá, to uncover the mysteries of a place where the veil between past and present, between the living and the dead, seems impossibly thin. Our destination? The Chorro de Quevedo, a cobblestone plaza steeped in colonial history, vibrant culture, and whispered tales of the supernatural. This seemingly innocuous square holds secrets dating back nearly 5 centuries, to the very founding of Bogotá itself. So dim the lights, find a comfortable spot, and join me as we peel back the layers of time to reveal the haunting lore of Chorro de Quevedo. To understand the supernatural essence of Chorro de Quevedo, we must first understand its pivotal role in history. The year was 1538. Spanish conquistador Gonzalo Jiménez de Quesada, having led a brutal expedition through the unforgiving terrain of what is now Colombia, arrived at the fertile plateau of the Andes. Here, amid indigenous Muisca settlements, he established a garrison that would become the foundation of Santa Fe de Bogotá. That garrison, that first Spanish foothold in the region, was established precisely at what we now know as Chorro de Quevedo. The small plaza, with its iconic fountain, marks the birthplace of one of Latin America's most significant cities. It is, in essence, ground zero for the collision of 2 worlds, the indigenous and the European, a collision that would forever alter the course of history in this region. The name Chorro de Quevedo itself has historical significance. Chorro refers to the water spring that once flowed here, providing vital sustenance for the early settlement. Quevedo is believed to reference a Spanish official who owned property in the area during colonial times. This humble water source became the lifeblood of the nascent city, drawing people to gather, to worship, to live. And speaking of worship, the small white chapel that stands in the plaza today, the Hermitage of San Miguel del Príncipe, marks the site of Bogotá's first church. This diminutive structure, with its simple architecture and stark white walls, isn't the original building that was lost to time, but it stands as a memorial to the first place of Christian worship in the city. But here's where our tale takes its first supernatural turn. According to local lore, the ground upon which the church was built was once a sacred site for the indigenous Muisca people. When the Spanish erected their church, they weren't just building on unused land. They were deliberately constructing their house of worship atop a place the natives considered spiritually significant, a common colonial practice meant to assert dominance and eradicate local beliefs. This act of cultural and spiritual replacement created what paranormal researchers call a thin place, a location where different spiritual energies converge and conflict, where the boundary between worlds becomes permeable. Many believe this convergence of sacred purposes, this spiritual palimpsest, laid the groundwork for the supernatural phenomena that would be reported in Chorro de Quevedo for centuries to come. As Bogotá grew from a frontier outpost to a colonial center of power, Chorro de Quevedo remained significant, though its prominence waxed and waned with the centuries. The plaza and its surrounding streets witnessed the unfolding drama of colonial life. The pageantry of religious processions, the brutality of conquest, the whispered conspiracies of revolution. The colonial period in what is now Colombia was marked by extreme social stratification. Spanish-born peninsulares occupied the highest echelons of society, followed by criollos, those of Spanish descent born in the Americas, mestizos, those of mixed European and indigenous heritage, indigenous peoples, and enslaved Africans. This rigid hierarchy was enforced through both law and violence. Walk through Chorro de Quevedo today, and you're literally walking atop layers of this complex history. The cobblestones beneath your feet have been trod by conquistadors, colonial officials, clergy, revolutionaries, poets, and countless ordinary citizens whose names have been lost to history. But some local historians and paranormal enthusiasts suggest that not all of these historical figures have left the plaza entirely. During the tumultuous colonial period, public executions were not uncommon in Bogotá, while the main square, now known as Plaza de Bolívar, was the primary site for such grim spectacles. Smaller plazas like Chorro de Quevedo reportedly witnessed their share of colonial justice, or injustice, depending on your perspective. One persistent tale speaks of a criollo merchant who was accused of sedition in the late 18th century, as revolutionary ideas began to simmer throughout Spain's American colonies. According to the story, this merchant, whose name has been obscured by time, was publicly executed in Chorro de Quevedo after a hasty trial designed more to instill fear than to determine guilt. His final words, so the story goes, were not a confession or a plea for mercy, but a curse upon the plaza and those who had condemned him. He swore that his spirit would remain, witnessing the eventual fall of Spanish rule and standing as an eternal testament to colonial cruelty. Visitors to the plaza in the early hours of the morning, particularly on the anniversary of Colombia's independence declaration, have reported seeing a male figure in colonial-era clothing standing motionless at the edge of the square, only to vanish when approached. Others describe sudden, inexplicable feelings of anger or injustice washing over them while passing through certain sections of the plaza. Could these be manifestations of this unnamed revolutionary still keeping his centuries-old vigil? Fast forward to the 20th and 21st centuries, and Chorro de Quevedo has transformed yet again. Now it stands at the heart of La Candelaria, Bogotá's historic district and cultural epicenter. The plaza has become a bohemian haven where artists, writers, musicians, and storytellers gather to create, to share, to keep the soul of Colombian culture alive. This vibrant artistic energy isn't coincidental. La Candelaria, and Chorro de Quevedo in particular, seem to exert a magnetic pull on creative spirits. Perhaps it's the palpable sense of history, the architectural beauty of the colonial buildings, or simply the vibrant community that has developed over decades. But some suggest there might be something more, something supernatural, driving this concentration of creative energy. Among the most fascinating cultural phenomena associated with Chorro de Quevedo are the cuenteros, traditional storytellers who gather in the plaza to share tales that blend history, myth, folklore, and urban legend. These modern-day bards keep alive an oral tradition that predates European arrival in the Americas, though the content of their stories has evolved to incorporate centuries of cultural exchange and experience. The cuenteros themselves often speak of Chorro de Quevedo as a place of power, a nexus where stories take on a life of their own. Many report experiencing moments of unusual inspiration while performing in the plaza, as if channeling narratives that emerge not just from their own imaginations, but from the collective memory of the place itself. One particularly persistent tale among the cuenteros involves a legendary storyteller from the mid-20th century known only as El Viejo, the old man. According to fellow storytellers, El Viejo was a fixture in Chorro de Quevedo for decades, enthralling audiences with tales of pre-Columbian myths, colonial intrigue, and modern urban legends. His specialty was ghost stories, particularly those set in La Candelaria itself. The story goes that El Viejo had no fixed address and seemed to survive solely on the meager tips offered by his audience and the occasional free meal from admiring local restaurant owners. When he wasn't performing, he could be found sitting quietly in a corner of the plaza, observing passers-by with keen, knowing eyes. Then, sometime in the 1970s, El Viejo simply vanished. No one saw him leave. He simply failed to appear for several days, then weeks, then months. Some assumed he had died, others that he had finally retired to some unknown location. A small search was organized by concerned regulars, but no trace of the old storyteller was ever found. Here's where the tale takes its supernatural turn. In the decades since El Viejo's disappearance, countless cuenteros have reported similar experiences while performing in his former spot. In the middle of their performances, particularly when telling ghost stories, they describe feeling a gentle pressure on their shoulders and experiencing a sudden flow of words and ideas that don't seem entirely their own. Stories they hadn't planned to tell emerge fully formed from their lips, often featuring historical details they had no way of knowing. Some believe that El Viejo never truly left Chorro de Quevedo, that his spirit remains, still driven by his passion for storytelling, occasionally borrowing the voices of today's cuenteros to ensure his stories are not forgotten. Audience members sometimes report seeing an elderly figure standing at the back of the crowd during these moments, a figure that vanishes when they try to focus on it directly. Is this merely a case of shared delusion, a storytelling tradition taking on a life of its own? Or does something of El Viejo truly linger in the plaza, unwilling or unable to leave the place that defined his existence? Beyond these historically rooted hauntings, Chorro de Quevedo boasts a rich tapestry of more recent supernatural phenomena and urban legends that continue to fascinate both locals and visitors. Perhaps the most widely known supernatural tale associated with the plaza involves the small church, the Hermitage of San Miguel del Príncipe. According to paranormal enthusiasts and ghost tour guides, this unassuming chapel harbors a strange power, particularly after dark. The legend states that if you approach the church door at midnight and knock precisely 3 times, no more, no less, you may receive an answer from the other side. This answer doesn't come in the form of a voice or a return knock, but rather as a sudden, inexplicable cold wind that seems to emanate from nowhere, even on the stillest of nights. Some visitors report feeling invisible hands touch their shoulders or brush against their faces in these moments. Those who have attempted this ritual report mixed results. Skeptics dismiss the cold winds as simple drafts, natural in a high-altitude city like Bogotá, where evening temperatures drop sharply. Others suggest that the power of suggestion leads people to interpret normal environmental changes as supernatural phenomena. But there are those who insist their experiences cannot be so easily explained away. People who describe sudden temperature drops of 10 degrees or more, confined to a space of just a few feet around the church door. Others report seeing their breath fog in the air directly in front of the door, while companions standing just a few steps away experience no such effect. What or who might be responding to these nocturnal knocks? Local legends offer several possibilities. Some say it is the spirit of a priest who died while saying Mass in the original church, his final prayers interrupted, his spiritual duties incomplete. Others suggest it might be indigenous spirits, guardians of the sacred site upon which the church was built, responding to those who show proper respect by knocking the ritual 3 times. A number with significance in many indigenous cosmologies. Beyond the church door ritual, the entire plaza has become known as a hotspot for what paranormal researchers call residual hauntings, supernatural phenomena that don't seem tied to specific intelligent entities, but rather represent energetic imprints of past events repeatedly playing out. Late-night visitors to Chorro de Quevedo report hearing sounds that seem out of time. The clatter of horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones, though the plaza has been closed to vehicular traffic for decades. Fragments of conversation in antiquated Spanish or, occasionally, indigenous languages. The sounds of construction as if the buildings surrounding the plaza were still being built. These auditory phenomena typically occur between 2 and 4 a.m., the so-called witching hours, when paranormal activity is believed to peak. They're most commonly reported on significant historical dates: the anniversary of Bogotá's founding, All Souls Day, or dates associated with key moments in Colombia's independence struggle. Paranormal researchers suggest that Chorro de Quevedo's unique combination of factors makes it an ideal environment for such phenomena. The plaza's status as the birthplace of a major city imbues it with historical significance. Its continued use as a gathering place for nearly 500 years has seen it absorb the emotional and energetic imprints of countless human experiences: joy and sorrow, creation and destruction, birth and death. Add to this the plaza's physical characteristics, enclosed by buildings on all sides, creating what acoustics experts call a sound well that captures and amplifies certain frequencies. And you have a location seemingly designed to bridge past and present, to allow echoes of history to bleed through into our modern experience. At the center of Chorro de Quevedo stands a fountain, not particularly grand or ornate, but symbolically powerful as a representation of the water source that gave the plaza its name and sustained the early settlement. This fountain, though not the original from colonial times, occupies the same space and serves as a tangible link to the plaza's origins. Water features prominently in the folklore of many cultures as conduits between worlds, bridges between the physical and spiritual realms. In Colombia, this association is particularly strong, with numerous legends about enchanted lakes, rivers with healing properties, and water spirits from both indigenous and Spanish traditions. The fountain at Chorro de Quevedo is no exception to this mystical association. According to some local legends, the water that once flowed naturally from this spot possessed unusual properties. It stayed fresher longer than water from other sources, had subtle healing properties, and, most intriguingly, sometimes reflected images that weren't physically present. Though the original spring has long since been redirected or dried up, replaced by modern plumbing, strange phenomena are still reported in connection with the current fountain. On nights with a full moon, particularly clear nights when the moon's reflection would naturally be visible in the water, some visitors claim to see additional reflections, faces not belonging to anyone present in the plaza, architectural features from buildings that no longer exist, or, in a few particularly unsettling accounts, scenes of violence from the city's turbulent past. One persistent story tells of a young woman who, in the early 2000s, was sitting by the fountain late one evening after attending a nearby cultural event. Gazing idly into the water, she suddenly gasped and backed away. When questioned by concerned friends, she claimed to have seen her own reflection age rapidly before her eyes, transforming from a woman in her 20s to an elderly figure with the same features. Shaken but intrigued, she returned to the plaza several times in subsequent weeks, attempting to recreate the experience. On her third visit, again during a full moon, she reportedly saw not her aged self, but a different scene entirely. A glimpse of what appeared to be the plaza as it might have looked centuries earlier, with different buildings and people in colonial-era clothing moving about their business, all reflected in water that should have shown nothing but moonlight and the surrounding modern structures. Psychologists and skeptics might explain such experiences as examples of pareidolia, the tendency of the human mind to perceive meaningful patterns in random stimuli, combined with the power of suggestion in a location already associated with supernatural tales. The play of moonlight on water, the subtle movements of liquid in even an apparently still fountain, can create fleeting impressions that a primed imagination might interpret as significant visions. Yet those who have experienced these unusual reflections remain convinced that something more is at work, that the fountain somehow retains a connection to the original spring and its purported mystical properties, occasionally offering glimpses across time to those receptive to such visions. As we move into more recent decades, the supernatural reputation of Chorro de Quevedo has evolved rather than diminished. The plaza has become a regular stop on Bogotá's increasingly popular ghost tours, with guides sharing a mixture of historical facts, traditional legends, and more recent, unexplained occurrences. These modern accounts lack the patina of age that lends credibility to older ghost stories, but they compensate with detail and contemporary documentation. In an age of smartphones and social media, experiences that might once have been dismissed as unreliable anecdotes now sometimes come with photographic or audio evidence, though such evidence remains, as always in paranormal investigation, subject to interpretation and skepticism. One of the most commonly reported modern phenomena involves unexplained photographic anomalies. Visitors taking pictures in the plaza, particularly near the church or fountain, often discover strange artifacts in their images, orbs of light that weren't visible to the naked eye, mysterious mists or fog in otherwise clear conditions, or, most disconcertingly, shadowy human-like figures standing in places where no person was present when the photograph was taken. Professional photographers and digital imaging experts typically explain these phenomena as the results of lens flare, dust particles catching the flash, digital compression artifacts, or simple camera malfunctions. And indeed, many such explanations are entirely plausible for specific cases. But the sheer volume of such reports centered on Chorro de Quevedo compared to other nearby historic locations gives even skeptics pause. Why would camera malfunctions or dust particles disproportionately affect this particular plaza? Is there something about the physical environment, perhaps unusual electromagnetic fields or atmospheric conditions, that interacts with photographic technology in unexpected ways? Or is something more supernatural at work? Beyond photographic anomalies, modern visitors report a range of subjective experiences that, while difficult to document or verify, follow consistent patterns that paranormal researchers find significant. These include sudden, localized temperature drops, particularly near the church door or in the northeastern corner of the plaza, where some historians believe a gallows once stood during the colonial period. Overwhelming emotional impressions that seem disconnected from the visitor's own state of mind. Waves of profound sadness near certain buildings, inexplicable anxiety in specific spots that fade immediately when the person moves a few steps away, or, conversely, unusual feelings of euphoria or creative inspiration while sitting near the fountain. Electronic malfunctions, cameras that worked perfectly elsewhere suddenly developing battery issues, mobile phones losing signal despite strong coverage throughout the rest of La Candelaria, voice recorders capturing unusual static, or, in some cases, faint voices or music not audible at the time of recording. One particularly intriguing case from 2018 involved a paranormal investigation team that conducted a formal overnight study in the plaza with permission from local authorities. Armed with various specialized equipment, EMF detectors, thermal cameras, audio recorders with noise filtering capabilities, they documented several unusual phenomena. Most notably, their thermal imaging revealed periodic cold spots that moved through the plaza in what appeared to be deliberate patterns rather than following air currents or other natural explanations. These cold spots, registering several degrees below the ambient temperature, would sometimes pause near members of the team before moving on, giving the distinct impression of conscious entities observing the observers. Their audio equipment captured numerous electronic voice phenomena, EVPs, sounds, and apparent speech not audible to the investigators at the time, but revealed upon later analysis of the recordings. Most were indistinct, but several contained clear Spanish phrases, including what appeared to be fragments of colonial-era formal speech, and, curiously, what a linguistic expert later identified as possible Muisca language words from the indigenous people who inhabited the area before Spanish arrival. As we conclude our exploration of Chorro de Quevedo, we're left with more questions than answers, which is perhaps as it should be when dealing with the supernatural. Is this historic plaza truly a thin place where past and present, physical and spiritual, intersect and overlap? Or are the countless reports of unusual phenomena merely the natural outcome of human imagination interacting with a location of profound historical significance? Perhaps both perspectives contain elements of truth. Places like Chorro de Quevedo, which have witnessed centuries of human experience, the full spectrum of joy and suffering, creativity and destruction, life and death, undeniably affect us in profound ways. Whether through some genuine paranormal mechanism or simply through the power of historical consciousness and psychological suggestion, such locations speak to us across time, reminding us that we are part of something larger than our individual lives. What's certain is that Chorro de Quevedo continues to accumulate stories, some historical, some legendary, some personal. Each visitor who experiences something unusual in the plaza, each storyteller who weaves the location into their tales. Each artist who draws inspiration from its atmosphere adds another layer to the rich tapestry of lore surrounding this remarkable place. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of Chorro de Quevedo. If you enjoyed this exploration of Bogotá's haunted history, please don't forget to subscribe to the Haunted Lore podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a rating and review. It helps others find our show and keeps these stories from fading into the mists of time. Until then, remember, every place has its stories, its secrets, its shadows. The veil between worlds is thinner than we think, and sometimes, if we listen carefully enough, we can hear the whispers from the other side.